The study delves into the context and processes that preceded and facilitated the emergence of the pharaonic civilization, which stands as a significant cultural milestone in human history. This text explores the foundational aspects of this civilization. It begins with an examination of paleoclimatology data, which reconstructs the wet and dry climatic periods in the northern half of Africa. This analysis aids in determining the periods of occupation or reoccupation of Nubia, as well as the times when the Saharan plateau was inhabited. The transition from the late Stone Age was characterized by the retreat of the Tardiglacial Desert, the end of the Wurm glaciation, the expansion of pluvial II, and the rise of lakeside settlements. Communities residing along rivers, streams, and waterways in the high and middle Nile valleys migrated northward, leaving behind evidence of pottery and basketry. They established Epipaleolithic settlements in Nubia and formed the foundational population of Kemet, significantly influencing its subsequent cultures and the pharaonic civilization. According to Diodorus of Sicily, the Ethiopians claimed that the Kemites were one of their colonies led to Kemet by Osiris. Diodorus, Library of History 3:3. These words, long regarded as mere legends, are gaining credibility with recent archaeological discoveries. The Kemet of the Pharaohs, renowned for its wisdom, science, and arts, no longer represents just the beginning of history or the dawn of consciousness, but emerges as a central figure in the ancient history of Africa and the world. It signifies the culmination of technical and social processes initiated in the High and Middle Nile valleys. Among the cultural centers established in Nilotic Sudan, from the Great Lakes in the south to the Third Cataract in the north, extending as far as the Kemetic Delta, that of the fishermen stands out as the most distinctive. Drawing from the archaeological exploration of the Sudanese and Nubian regions along the Nile, the following text attempts to reconstruct the influence of the fishermen on the cultural centers of Sudan, Nubia, and ancient Kemet, spanning from Nakadawan around 4000 BCE to the conquest of Alexander at the end of the 4th century BCE. These are remnants left behind by societies whose way of life primarily revolved around the exploitation of fishery resources, particularly waterways. This fisherman culture is well documented, dating back to the 10th millennium BCE in the Great Lakes region, and it reached its peak development during the 7th millennium BCE. Discoveries of fish and bone remains, clubs and arrowheads, barbed wire basketry, pottery, hooks, and nets constitute the fundamental evidence that enabled researchers to reconstruct the methods and tools used by these people for their livelihoods and social continuity. Starting from this era, this culture expanded northward to Sudan, Nubia, Kemet, and the Sahara, thanks to a humid zone created by the Chadian pluvial II and lacustrine transgressions during the late Stone Age. This culture is linked to the creators of the microlithic Kenyan Eberan culture, known for their expertise in working with obsidian. In Kemet, they utilized obsidian to craft surgical instruments for embalming the deceased. The people of this culture engaged in fishing, shellfish gathering, and hunting river-dwelling animals like crocodiles and turtles. They employed bone nets, baskets, spears, and harpoons for these activities. Their remains have been found around the Rutanzige, Turkana, and Nakuru lakes. They utilized basketry for harvesting and transporting mollusks and later developed pottery, influenced by basketry techniques for cooking shellfish. Along the Nile, they established households reliant on fishery resources, constituting the earliest population in Kemet, often referred to as the primitive Nilotics by many scholars. During the dynastic period, these fishermen were referred to as rekit, represented by the image of a lapwing associated with a boat. In contrast to the aristocrats, these fishermen constituted the plebs since the monarchy's inception. The pharaoh's triumph is depicted on the club head of the sovereign, signifying the Rekit fishermen's significance as the first true inhabitants of the lower Nile's alluvial plain, preceding even the pastoralists. Rock paintings in Tibet depict these fishermen pulling their boats like stubborn bulls across the cataracts to enter the territory that would later become the pharaonic kingdom of Kemet. In the pre-dynastic period, certain Nubian populations, known as the Neken, lived there. These fishermen, after developing phases I and II of the Sabellian culture in Nubia, introduced it to Kemet during its third phase. They brought many elements of pharaonic civilization to Kemet during the pre-Neolithic and Neolithic periods. They were the first to inhabit and cultivate the previously inhospitable alluvial plain of the lower Nile. This migration of populations from East Africa, the original home of the Fisherman culture, around 20,000 BP during the time of the Kormusan culture, was connected to the progressive drying of East Africa's climate around 5000 BCE. This climatic change likely contributed to the eventual decline of the fisherman culture in Nubia. The construction of the Grand Aswan Dam sparked a flurry of excavations and explorations of archaeological sites in Nubia, spanning from the first to the third cataract. Consequently, Nubian centers of the fisherman culture yield more information to researchers compared to Sudanese centers, which provided the developmental framework. Additionally, Nubia served as a stage for refining technological and social changes. At the root of this economic adaptation and its resulting social shifts likely lay ecological pressures. Paleoclimatological studies have revealed that the entire northern half of Africa, up to latitudes 12 to 10 degrees N, was once covered by an immense and scorching desert known as the Late Glacial, lasting from 21,000 to 15,000 BP. Concurrently, in Europe, Phase 4 of the warm glaciation was ongoing. Starting from the latter date, a retreat of the late glacial desert southward occurred. Feeling confined in the dense equatorial and tropical forests, populations sought refuge along the upper Nile and began migrating northward into the Sahara, Nubia, and southern Kemet. Everywhere they went, they adapted their productive activities to exploit watercourses, engaging in fishing, river hunting, and shell harvesting. During the Pluvial II period and lake transgression, which allowed for a diversification of productive activities, Nubian communities maintained the tradition of Epipaleolithic microlithism, developed basketry and pottery, and, innovatively, began raising goats and catfish cellars to supplement their diet. The initiation of vegetable cultivation in Nubia, focusing on harvesting and preparing wild grass seeds, led to agricultural experiments exemplified by the adzes found in Khartoum and Eshahinab. In Khartoum, evidence of a fixed habitat with hut usage, known as the Sudanese or Saharo-Sudanese tradition, dates back to the Neolithic. In Kemet, a similar practice emerged during Phase 3 of the Silcilian period. As centers of technological change, Sudan and Nubia were early hubs for advanced pottery production and the use of green stones. Around Lakes Turkana and Rutan Zegai, adzes, hoes, and grinders were utilized. The prevalence of barbed harpoons, hooks, and fish remains, coupled with microlithism, indicates the strong connection of Nilotic communities to the Nile and a fisherman's way of life. Their pottery, particularly that found in the catfish caves of Khartoum and Eshahinab, features a smooth surface with red slip and black edges. Clubs were used to crush the heads of large fish. Pottery, originally invented by fishermen to cook mollusks, made its way to Nubia during the Shamarkian period, around 5750 BCE, and to Kemet during the 5th millennium BCE. Thus, Nubia acted as a mediator and enhancer between the Nilotic culture of Sudan, south of the Third Cataract, and ancient Kemet. This role was exemplified by the Abkhan culture, a Nubian variant closely related to Khartoumian, bridging the gap between the Nubian culture and ancient pre-dynastic Kemet. Although the founders of pharaonic civilization initially appear as farmers, They retained traces of their previous occupation as fishermen during the pre-dynastic era, 4000 to 3200 BCE. This is evidenced by hieroglyphic characters depicting fishing tools and instruments. Migrating from the Upper Nile to Kemet via Es-Shahinab, these fishermen left behind remnants of the Sabellian and Silcilian cultures, which represent the true epi-Paleolithic cultures of Kemet. These remnants include segments of circles, triangles, scalons, trapezoids, and perches, reflecting the pure Nubio-Sudanese tradition. From the late Stone Age, fishermen in this region invented, perfected, and perpetuated microlithism. These fishermen, who later contributed to the territory of the Kemetic kingdom and pharaonic civilization, introduced various cultural elements. They brought counterweights for fishing nets, characteristic of Tenerian culture in Nubia, as well as gouges, invented in Khartoum, and Kemetic pottery of classes P and B, red pottery with black edges, from Nubio-Sudanese fishermen. These cultural artifacts, including gouges, club heads, barbed harpoons, and nets, had been in use for a long time and were attested in Fayum during the 5th millennium BCE. Es-Shahinab, itself derived from Khartoumian culture, played a pivotal role in transmitting the fisherman culture from Sudan to Kemet. The Abkan culture served as a relay, passing on the fisherman culture to Group A and the Nakadans. This cultural exchange is evident in various artifacts found in Group A and Badarian contexts, such as high pottery and bowls with two black edges. Additionally, the club, initially used as a fishing instrument, eventually became a weapon and symbolized power in dynastic Kemet. The Nubio-Sudanese fishermen, starting from the ancient phase of Khartoum in Makkalian, even introduced the practice of goat raising into Kemet. Moreover, they brought the custom of wrapping the deceased in goat skins, further enriching the cultural heritage of ancient Kemet. In the Badarian tombs, B22b and B25f, among others, black-edged cups have been discovered. This tradition originates from the Abkan culture, which was a Nubian settlement that perpetuated the Sudanese fisherman culture of Khartoum. Additionally, the pottery decoration in Gurzian Kemet, Class N, mirrors that of Neolithic pottery fragments found in Khartoum, which exhibited 5 varieties of this class. Reflecting the journey of fishermen from the Great Lakes to Kemet, concave-based arrowheads from Fayum are abundant in Nubia, particularly at Kmt Playa from the 6th millennium BCE. The influence of the black fishermen from the Great Lakes and Sudan is further evident in Kemetic homes of the Badarian culture, where arrowheads, knives made of flint, copper pins, and various fishing instruments were used. Nets were utilized for both fishing and hunting. It is likely that fishermen from Khartoum and Es-Shahinab, among others, invaded southern Kemet, particularly the Thebaide, through the Tenere region. This invasion originated from the southwest, specifically from the Tenerian area. The tradition of the Greek School of African Studies posited that the shaping of the Saharan Plateau and the alluvial plain of the lower course of the Nile was the result of black populations migrating from the Upper Nile. However, modern historical scholarship, often confined to textual criticism, has relied on probability formulas and dismissed any conclusive historical evidence. Archaeology, through prospecting and excavations, increasingly reveals traces that form the basis of historical discourse. Historical figures like Herodotus, known as the father of history, demonstrated a willingness to record facts, even those he personally doubted, illustrating historical objectivity. Similarly, Diodorus and Strabo referenced various historical sources in their narrations, highlighting the importance of tracing traditions back to their origins. Through paleoclimatological reconstructions and archaeological findings, it is evident that Nubian cultural centers, reliant on fishing resources, hunting, breeding, and vegetable cultivation, date back to at least 20,000 BP. Microlithic tools, dating to around 18,000 BCE, further illustrate the continuity and transmission of this cultural current from Nubia to Kemet, evidenced by sites like Gambel's Cave. The ideological, scientific and technological consciousness of ancient Kemites bears traces of a fishing-based society, indicating the importance of understanding the mentality of these ancient communities and the evolution of their civilization since the late Stone Age. As archaeological knowledge progresses, our understanding of ancient Kemetic society and its developmental phases will continue to evolve positively. Now, let's delve into the land of Kush, which served as an immediate precursor to ancient Kemet. We'll examine its evolution and historical connection with Kemet. The toponym of Kush, which refers to Nubia, is often encountered. It is from the 2nd millennium BC that pharaonic texts begin to mention the toponym Kush. It was used to designate a socio-political entity of Upper Nubia, whose constitution took place between 2200 and 2000 BC. Babakar Sal, The Advent of the Condesis, Ankandak 3, June 1994, page 68-81. See also Babakar Sal, The Ethiopian Roots of Ancient Kemet, Paris, Keper al-Harmattan, 1999. Present-day Sudan covers a large part of Nubia from Nubio-Kemetic antiquity. The etymology of Sudan could be the reading of the Kemetic expression Nesut, which designates royalty and means which belongs to the south, in the apparent order of the hieroglyphic signs, which would give Southern Sudan. It should be noted the existence of several preconceptions on the part of a number of historians and Egyptologists concerning the links between Nubia and pharaonic Kemet, aimed at arbitrarily opposing Nubians and ancient Kemites. On an ethnic level, the supposed almost impassable nature of the cataracts acting as almost impermeable partitions between the lower Nile Valley and Central Africa with regard to population movements. A supposed decisive occupation of the Nile Valley by populations coming from the north. The existence in certain periods of conflicting relations between ancient Nubia and Kemet. Expressions such as Sudan, the land of the Black Pharaohs, the Black Pharaohs of the 25th dynasty. Pharaohs from Africa that we often encounter testify to the persistence of these ideological postulates which want everything price-make ancient Kemites non-black, despite archaeological discoveries and the work of African researchers in particular, C.A. Diop, Tit Obenga, Bisal Etiu M. Lam. See in particular the report of the Egyptology Conference of Cairo, 1974, the different issues of the ANKH magazine and the work of Babakar Sal, the Ethiopian roots of ancient Kemet, the cataracts, the Batnel Hagar, the Bailey of Stones, rocky region upstream of the second cataract, the main Nubian sites from south to north, Naga. Three, the Neolithic 5000-3400 BC. Sites: Khartoum, Kadero, Ei Kadada. Activities: hunting, fishing, domestication of animals, agriculture. Necropolises installed high up on mounds, several thousand graves. Material culture, ceramics, ornaments, lithic tools, etc. Fall: Group AO, the 3500-3050 BC. Sites: Lower Nubia. Activities: hunting, fishing, domestication of animals, agriculture. Social organization, semi-nomadism, temporary camps. Habitat: hemispherical huts, reeds, plaster straw, stone paving. Necropolises: oval or rectangular wells, topped with a stone mound. Material culture: ceramics, ornaments, bracelets, necklaces, amulets, ivory pendants, shell, earthenware, stone, rippled pottery. Kustul, incense, burner showing the symbolic elements of royalty. Prefiguration of Kemetic royalty. Close relations with Upper Kemet. Exchange of products. 5. Group C. Sites: Aniba, Fares and activities: hunting, fishing, pastoralism, agriculture. Social organization: social stratification appearing in large necropolises. Habitat: villages with houses built of stone. Necropolises: oval or rectangular wells, topped with stone slabs, stelae planted in the ground. Material culture: ceramics, ornaments, bracelets, necklaces, amulets, ivory pendants, shell, earthenware, stone, wrinkled pottery, clothing, loincloths, sandals. Relations with Kemet: mentions made in Kemetic texts of the Old Kingdom. Kemetic influences. 6. The Kingdom of Kerma, 2500–1500 BC. D. Sites: Kerma, just upstream of the 3618 cataract, Upper Nubia. Activities: hunting, fishing, breeding, agriculture, commerce, metallurgical workshops, brosiers and potters. Social organization: state, Kingdom of Kush. Habitat: urbanization, architectural complexes, palaces, warehouses, etc. Defensive systems: pits, walls, religious buildings, defufa, chapel of a princely tomb. Necropolises: burials that can reach several hundred meters in diameter, topped by a tumulus of sandstone and white quartz slabs, richly equipped. Furniture, seat, boxes, tables, etc. Jewelry, bronze objects, weapons, daggers, knives, ceramics, bucranes, animals. Relations with Kemet: powerful neighbor of Kemet. Contemporary pharaohs: Sesostris III, Thutmose IV, Thutmose III, Thutmose I's 18th dynasty. Conquered Nubia from the 1st to the 6th cataract. Nubia then became an Kemetic province with a governor at its head. See letter from Shampol Ion. Thutmose III founded the city of Napata at the foot of Jebel Barkal. 7th, the Kingdom of Napata, 10 to 5th, 656 BC. Tanuetamani, Atlanersa, Senkamanisken, Anlamani, Irike, Amanote, Harisyotef, Nastasen. Construction of the Temple of Amon-Re, approximately 600 mil long. At the foot of Jebel Barkal, necropolises of El Kuru and Nuri. Pyramids with a chapel. 8. The Kingdom of Meroe, 275–250 BC Adesh, Ir Kamani. Moving the royal necropolis from Nuri to Meroe further south, well upstream of the 5th cataract. 250 Ode Vieux JT, 50 Pay. JT, Arnekamani, Adikalamani, Akamani de Ke, Kandase, Shanadaketo, Taneidamani, Teritekas, Kandase Amanichaketo, Natakamani, Kandase Amanitore, Chorkara. Meroitic inscriptions from Naga, among the oldest known, under the reign of Kandate Shanadaketo. 24 AD, Meroe attacks Philae and Elephantine. Rome campaigns against Napata. 300 AD, campaign of the Kingdom of Aksum against Meroe. End of the Kingdom of Kush. 9. Christianization of Nubia. 540, 580 AD. AD. 10. Islamization of Nubia. 642 AD. AD. 1. Geographical setting and population. Now we will discuss the development of ancient Kemet. Ancient Kemet stretches for more than 1,000 kilometers along the Nile River, approximately between Aswan in the south and the Mediterranean coast in the north. Throughout its history, pharaonic Kemet extended its domination or influence beyond its natural limits. A strip of fertile land extends on both sides of the Nile, bounded to the east by the Arabian Desert and to the west by the Libyan Desert and the Sahara. Note, west of the Nile, the existence of important oases when moving from south to north. Karge, Dakhle, Farafre, Bahariye, Siwa. The fertility of the Nile Valley comes from the alluvial flood of the Nile. Let us cite some pharaonic Kemetic terms relating to the country itself. Kemet, Kemet Huayatseto, the land of black people. Upper Kemet, Shemau. Lower Kemet, Meho. The delta, Tameho. The double country Kemet, Tawiteawi. Upper Kemet and Lower Kemet. The desert, Deshret. The great river, Iterao, the Nile. The flood, happy the flood of the Nile, the Nile. The land of the god Taneter. The land of the ark, Teseti, Nubia. The beloved land, Tameri Kemet. Nom, Sepat, territorial administrative division. Faulkner's Dictionary. A concise dictionary of Middle Kemetic, Oxford, 1964, Pardue 286, gives the following for the designation of ancient Kemet, therefore literally means not Egypt, but the Black Country, Black Lando, in the sense of an administered, urbanized country, as indicated by the determinative X. The name, Egypt, was theorized to be Greek form of the Kemetic name of Memphis, capital and port of ancient Kemet, Het Kapta, Hak, sanctuary of the Ka of Ptah. Babakar Sal, in his work, The Ethiopian Roots of Ancient Kemet, describes the geoclimatic framework in which the establishment of Kemetic civilization took place. In an article entitled, Was Kemet a Gift of the Nile?, he clarifies the true meaning that should be given to this expression. The statement, Kemet is a gift of the Nile, has been attributed to Herodotus. How many generations of students and high school students have had to discuss such a subject? Certainly this expression is well contained in the paragraph 5 of Euterpe, term which designates a muse and which the author used as the title of his second book. But this expression, although used by the one whom, since Cicero, has been called the father of history, does not express and never expressed an idea of the one to whom it is attributed, that is to say, Herodotus. It is while painting the natural setting of the country of the pharaohs that Herodotus writes, They, the priests, also told me that the first king of Kemet, who was a man, had been Min, that in his time, Al-Kemet, except the Thebaic Nome, was a swamp. Then he adds, Now, of the territory which has just been described, this is the part of Kemet where the Greeks go by boat, the delta, in other words. The greatest part has left me, seemed to me to be, as the priest said, an acquisition which was added to the land of the Kemites. According to him, everything above the city of Memphis, between the Arabian and Libyan chains, had once been a marine gulf. At the accession of Minmenes, Narmer, Al-Kemet except the Thebaic Nome, southern Upper Kemet, as far as Edfu, was a swamp. And nothing then emerged from the parts of the country now existing in the 5th century BC, below north of Lake Maris. In short, under the pen of Herodotus, what was added to the original country of the Kemites, that is to say the piece of land that can be considered as a gift from the Nile, was the delta, and only delta. The study of sea levels based on the dating of geological samples made it possible to corroborate Herodotus's remarks on the formation of the Kemetic land. Indeed, in chapter 5, Legends, Stories, Sea Levels, of his book Man and the Climate, Paris, Edition de Noël, 1985, Jacques Laberry, former director of the Center for Low Radioactivities of the CEA-CNRS, in Gif-sur-Yvette, writes, Although these written documents are few in number at the beginning, limited to a few impressions of royal seals, they nevertheless shed light on the early history of Kemet, a little before the beginning of the first dynasty. It was then the Nakadan era. Kings had been succeeding one another for a long time already in southern Kemet, which we also call Upper Kemet, that is to say, all along the Nile Valley, located further south than the current position of Cairo. Other kings also existed in northern Kemet, that is to say, the region constituted by the Nile Delta. But these kings of the Delta had not settled for a long time, at the very knot for 2 or 3 centuries. We now know that it is because previously the delta was still submerged. The link between the lowering of sea levels and the development of Kemetic civilization is clear. It exists, in fact, as we will see now, a very good concordance between the Kemetic carbon-14 dates and those of the exit of the delta from the sea around 4700 BCE. We thus date a quantity of remains attributable to human activity in the delta, the Nile Valley, and also in the regions surrounding this valley. This made it possible to know that at a certain moment in the past, man occupied or did not occupy these places. And in this way, we made a very curious observation throughout the entire extent of the southern kingdom. That is to say, in the upper Nile Valley from south of Cairo, as well as its extensions into present-day Sudan, human artifacts are found well beyond of 20,000 BCE. We also find numerous very ancient remains in what is today Palestine and Jordan, as well as in the territory of Libya. In short, this entire region of the Near East was revealed, thanks to carbon-14, to have been very anciently populated. From the Upper Paleolithic, the entire region, except the Nile Delta. For this one, the carbon-14 dates only begin around 4200 to 3000 BC. But from that moment, very quickly, they became very numerous. In fact, everything happens as if human settlement had only taken place in the delta from this date, whereas everywhere else, as we have just said, it had existed for a long time. These results show that the movement of Kemetic civilization from the south towards the Nile Delta is correlated with the lowering of sea level and perfectly matches the tradition reported by the ancients. The precedence of Upper Kemet over the Nile Delta in the genesis of Kemetic civilization is further illustrated by the results of archaeological excavations, including those carried out by the American archaeologist Fred Wendorf. Abu Simbel, a joint Egyptian-American archaeological mission, has unearthed a prehistoric archaeological city in the El Nabta region, west of Abu Simbel. The history of this city dates back 9,000 years and demonstrates that the western desert to the south of Kemet was the cradle of Kemetic civilization. Led by Dr. Fred Wendorf, professor of anthropology at the University of Dallas, this scientific team has continued its excavation work for 7 years, with the collaboration of some archaeologists and geologists. Egyptian geologist Dr. Mohammed El-Bahi said that the results recorded by the mission probably make El Nabta the oldest city inhabited by the ancient Kemites. Gigantic stone buildings were also discovered, which would undoubtedly be the remains of a temple. El Sayed El Naga, discovery of an ancient city dating back 9,000 years to Abu Simbel, Al-Akhbar of April 20, 1992. The site of the oldest royal necropolises in Kemet is located at Hierakonpolis, located slightly south of El Kab, therefore in Nubia. The following testimony from the Greek historian Diodorus of Sicily, circa 63 BCE, 14 CE, is fully consistent with the archaeological data. The Ethiopians say that the Egyptians are one of their colonies which was led into Egypt by Osiris. They even claim that this country was at the beginning of the world only a sea, but that the Nile, carrying in its floods a lot of silt of Ethiopia, had finally filled it and made it part of the continent. They add that the Egyptians took from them, as from their authors and their ancestors, the greater part of their laws. Diodorus of Sicily, Universal History, Book 3. Important note: the Ethiopians, in the sense of the ancient Greek and Latin authors, are the Nubians, one of the terms by which the ancient Kemites designated themselves. Cyril Faulkner, A Concise Dictionary of Middle Kemetic, Oxford, 1964, p. 286, is, literally, The collective term KMT does not mean Egyptians, but blacks, as the hieroglyphic reading of the following. Symbols of Upper Kemet in the south, successively the lotus flower, Soshan, SSN, the vulture, Mut, MWT, the Shirpus Rush, South, SWT, the white crown, Hejet, symbols of Lower Kemet in the north, successively the papyrus plant, Waj, WAD, the cobra, Jet, the bee, BIT, the red crown, Deshret. The double Sekemti crown is the symbol of the unification of Upper and Lower Kemet. 2. The Nomes. A nome is a habitable space developed thanks to work such as irrigation. The Nomes were led by Shah or Sa, etymology of Sheikh, who also bore the title of Mb Kulyuti, Neb Haut, Lord of the Castle. The designation of the Nomes and their respective signs testify to the cultural unity of the Nile Valley even before its unification. The Nomes of Upper Kemet. The Nomes of Lower Kemet. The oldest of the Nomes is that of Tasseti, in Nubia. 3. The major periods of Kemetic history. The historian Egyptologist J. Piren proposes the following periodization. First cycle, from the pre-dynastic period to the end of the 6th dynasty. Phase 1, from origins to the first monarchies. Phase 2, genesis of the unified monarchy. Phase 3, centralized monarchy. Phase 4, absolute monarchy. Phase 5, the disintegration of power. Phase 6, feudalization. Second cycle, from the end of the 6th dynasty to the 20th dynasty. Phase 1, feudal dismemberment. Phase 2, the monarchy reconstituted the 11th dynasty. Phase 3, centralized monarchy, 1580, 1339, 18th dynasty. Phase 4, absolute monarchy, 1339 to 1225. Phase 5, the disintegration of power. Phase 6, feudalization, 1167-1090. Third cycle, from the 21st dynasty to the sack of Thebes by the Assyrians. Phase 1, feudal dismemberment, 1090-663 BC. Phase 2, the reconstituted monarchy. Phase 3, absolute monarchy. Phase 4, the disintegration of power. See also the work of Cheikh Anta Diop, Anteriority of Negro Civilizations, on this subject. 4. Some characteristics of the Kemetic state. The Kemetic state is a state in the modern sense of the term. Some characteristics: equal rights for women and men. The woman disposes of her property without her husband's authorization. Existence of a public right. Body of civil servants whose office is not hereditary. Appointment, remuneration, salary, hierarchy. Justice is entrusted to royal courts. Tax makes it possible to remunerate state agents. The tax is proportional to the income of each Kemetic matrilineal regime. The Nomes become integral parts of the general state system, unification, creation of a national army, existence of diplomacy, carrying out major works, educational and legal system based on math, mastery of border security, diplomatic relations with the rest of Black Africa. The principle of monarchical power never seems to have been called into question. 5. Chronology of the pharaohs and queens of Kemet. If history begins conventionally with writing, before that it was proto-history and prehistory, then Kemetic history begins around 3400 BC. The inscriptions from the Uji tomb of Abydos, traced in ink on jars, pottery, or engraved on labels. The sources of Kemetic history are multiple. The monuments, Kmt or Notes on Kemet, which constitute a history of Kemet written by an Kemetic priest, Manetho, bilingual, pharaonic, Kemetic, and ancient Greek, who lived in the 3rd century BC, born in Sebenitos, in the Delta. Manetho divided Kemetic history into 30 royal dynasties. The royal tables of Abydos, Karnak, Saqqara, the stone of Palermo, the royal canon of Turin, rock inscription number 81 of Sehel, the Shabaka stone, the Rosetta stone, the writings of ancient Greco-Latin authors, including Herodotus. More than 120 indigenous pharaohs succeeded one another over a period of approximately 3,000 years. Note, the restitution of the chronology of Kemetic history varies between historians. Progress in archaeological, linguistic, and historical knowledge will ultimately lead to a complete review of the presentation of the history of the Nile Valley, and in particular to call into question the periodization of Kemetic history, as well as certain denominations adopted to describe this history. Astronomical events relating to the attested concomitants of the rising of the sun and the star Sirius make it possible to clarify the chronology of the history of ancient Kemet. The Sothic calendar has a periodicity of 1460 years. 1. The first rulers, ca. 3400 BCE. The sites of Nakada and Abydos in Upper Kemet, Hierakonpolis and Kustul in Nubia have yielded remains testifying to the emergence of centers of power and sovereigns who extended their influence and control as far as Palestine. Over a period beginning around 3900 BC, our era. Several names of sovereigns have been identified over a period ranging from 3400 to 3150 BCE. Scorpion Dashai, Naiho, Peho, Hatho, Hedgeho, Iriho. Like the show, the reproductions below. The sovereign Anuteraneter. A sovereign is represented on this incense burner exhumed at Kustul in Nubia. The Anu, a population that populated Kemet, are said to be the founders of several cities, including Yaunet, Esne, Yunasut, Hermontis, Younu, Heliopolis. The city of Neken or Hierakonpolis, in Upper Kemet, dedicated to the falcon Horus, is one of the places at the beginning of the history of pharaonic Kemet. Scorpion Daserquoise, representation of the head of King Scorpion's club. White crown, Hedjet, from Upper Kemet. Ritual outfit, bull's tail attached to the belt. A rite of the hoe, opening of the dikes, inaugurating the flood. Act of foundation of a temple or a city, bow, the people, the Rekit, place a Hierakonpolis. Narmer men, Menes. Palette of Narmer and representation of the head of the club CFE comment by T. Obenga and C.A. Diop in NNNC. Considered the unifier of the Nile Valley, political unification of Upper and Lower Kemet. Narmer's palette. Egyptologists have introduced the terms Dynasty 0 and even Dynasty 00 to group the sovereigns who reigned before the dynastic period inaugurated by Pharaoh Menes. 2. Pharaohs of the Thinite period. Capital this in Upper Kemet near Abydos. Tombs at Abydos. First Dynasty, 3050. 2890 BC. Horaha, name of Nebti, son of Narmer and Nithotep, goddess Ninth Athena, founding of Memphis at the southern end of the delta. Jer Jedden, Anjib Semerket Ka'a, second dynasty, 2890-2686. Hotep Sekemui, Nebre, Ninter. Seth Peribsen, Kasekemui. Kasekemui, name of Horus. The two mighty ones appear. This pharaoh repelled enemies coming from the north. See drawings and inscriptions on the limestone statue of Kasekemui found at Hierakonpolis. In summary, chronology uncertainties remain. Social life, class of nobles appears. Political life, women can rule. Military interventions to maintain political unity. Securing the state. Creation of Memphis, divine monarchy. Intellectual life, generalization of writing. Constitution of historical archives. Economy, development of the territory. Creation of institutional taxation. Technology, sciences, development of architecture, form and materials. Development of crafts. Use of the calendar. Building of temples. 3. Old Kingdom, 2686-181 BC. BC from the 3rd to the 6th dynasties. Pyramid builders, the Sphinx. Texts of the pyramids. Some of the pharaohs. Sanakht, strong protection, or Nebka, 2686-2613, founder of the 3rd dynasty. He married a daughter of the last king of the Tertian dynasty. Illustration of the matrilineal character of Kemetic society. The Yether, Neteriket, he whose body is divine. 3rd dynasty, 2686-2649. It was the reign of Pharaoh Djeser that lived the scholar Imhotep, later deified. Saqqara funerary complex, step pyramid, inauguration of stone architecture in the world. Snefru, he of beauty, 2613-2589, founder of the 4th dynasty. He married a daughter of the last king of the 3rd dynasty, Huni, father of Cheops. Cheops, Bakufu, Khnum protects me. 2589-2566, 4th dynasty. Chephren, Rekhaf, he appears as Rekh. 2558-2532, 4th dynasty. Mykerinos, Menkaure, durable like the souls of Ra. 2532-2504, 4th Dian. Userkaf, his soul is powerful. 2498-2491, founder of the 5th dynasty. He married Kenthouse, daughter of Mykerinos. Pharaoh Sahore, he who is close to Re, 2532-2504 BC, 5th dynasty. Unas, 2375-2345, 5th din. It is in the pyramid of Unas that the pyramid texts appear for the first time. Texts from the pyramid texts from the sarcophagi Book of the Dead. Teti the Fighter, 2345-2181, founder of the 6th dynasty, 2345-2181. He married Iput, one of Unas' daughters, thus legitimizing his power and taking the name Horus Seheteptawi, he who pacifies the double country. He maintains the unity of the country following the unrest which followed the death of Unas. One of his daughters, Sesh Sehet, married the vizier Meraruka, Pepi Proof, Merire, Emedere, 2332-2283, 6th din. Its pyramid is called Men NFR, stable and perfect, from which the name Memphis comes, Grecized. Herkuf's travels and missions, see Bisal and Cage Magazino. Chronology, still uncertainties about certain pharaohs, succession, length of reign, etc. Disagreements noted between Manetho and the Turin canon and/or the Palermo stone. Social life, development and diversification of professions. Development of the scribe class, constitution of an elite of very high intellectual level associated with central power. Enrichment of the nobles. Political life, confirmation of the matrilineal character in the transmission of power. Important role of women. Pharaoh represented in the company of his wife. Move of the capital from Hierakonpolis to Memphis. Installation of absolute monarchy. Disintegration of power from the 6th dynasty. Intellectual life, generalization of writing in administration, creation of literature, appearance of great religious texts, development of solar worship, divination of Pharaoh, religious life, generalization of writing in administration, creation of literature, appearance of great religious texts, development of solar worship, divination of Pharaoh, economy, prosperity, enrichment of the nobles, but also periods of famine, management of large construction sites, certified long-distance exchanges, product imports, new censuses of goods and resources, technology, science, art, development of architecture, generalization of stone constructions, pyramids, development of engineering techniques, stone technology, metallurgy, construction of large ships, development of the arts, new themes in the tombs, painted frescoes of daily life. 4. I intermediate period, 2181-1, 2040 BC, from the 7th to the 10th dynasties. With the death of Pepi II, a period of great instability set in, endangering the political unity of the Kemetic state. The monarchy is the issue of clashes between nomarchs. In particular, a struggle for control of the country took place between a family from Heracleopolis, 9th and 10th dynasties, and a princely family from Thebes, from which the 11th dynasty would come. 5. Middle Kingdom, 2040-1782 BC, 11th and 12th dynasties. The Middle Kingdom established the royal title, which consisted of the attribution of 5 names to the pharaoh. The first is given at birth and the other 4 at the time of coronation. Name of Horus, name of Nebti or the 2 mistresses, name of the golden Horus, crowning name that of the reed and the bee, birth name son of Re, Antef first, Sarantef son of Reantef, Sehertau, the peacemaker of the 2 lands, 2134-2107, founder of the 11th dynasty, 2134-1991. Tomb at Thebes, left bank. Montuhotep II, Montu is satisfied. Nebepetre, Lord Ra is satisfied. 4th king of the 11th dynasty, he is the unifier of Kemet. 50 years of reign. Temple tomb at Deir el-Bahari. Nearby, collective grave, military cemetery of 60 soldiers. Architectural innovation, prosperity of the country. Amenemhat, first, Amon is at the head. Sehetepibre, he who rejoices the heart of Ra, 1991 to 1962, founder of the 12th dynasty, 1991 to the 1782. Originally from Upper Kemet, he worships Amon, 200 years of stability. Transfer from the capital, about 30 kilometers from Memphis. Introduction of the royal title, Ohem Mesut, he who renews births. Introduction of the practice of co-management of power. Amenemhat associates his son Senusret, Sesostris first. Sobek Neferou, the beauties of Sobek. Sobekare, Sobek is the soul of Re. 1785-1782. In summary, 6. Second intermediate period, 1782-1570 BC, from the 13th to the 17th dynasties. 13th dynasty, Ho, Awibre, Re relieves the heart, circa 1760. Statue of the Ka of King Ho. 15th and 16th dynasties, Hyksos occupation, Heka Kasut, princes of foreign countries, from 1663 to 1555. Control of the eastern desert and the delta by a coalition of Semitic leaders. Sacking of Memphis. Adopted deities, Seth, Astarte, and Reshep. Sharek Yakub Har, Kian Apophis Wise, Apophis II, Anatar Yakobam. 17th dynasty, a Theban lineage, Sobekem Saftu, Antef 7, Ta-I, Ta-2, Kamuse, from Elephantine to Abydos. War against the Hyksos, leading to their definitive expulsion by Ahmose, Prince of Thebes. 7. The New Kingdom, 1570-1070 BC. AD. 18th to 20th dynasties. Ahmose, the moon is born. Nepetire, Re is master of force. 1570-1546. and Queen Ahmes Nefertari, founder of 18th dynasty and initiates the new kingdom. His mother is Ahotep. Amenhotep, Amon is satisfied, Amenophis, Jehutimes, born of Thoth, Tutmos, Hatshepsut, the first of the women. Matkare Justice is the Ka of Re. Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, living image of Aten. Horemheb, Horus is celebrating. Ramses is he of Seth, originally from Avaris in the Delta, inaugurated the 19th dynasty, of which Ramses II would be the most illustrious representative. Ramses re-fathered him. Great architectural achievements, notably in Thebes, Valley of the Kings and Queens. Kemet extends its power over the Mediterranean countries. The 19th dynasty ends with the reign of Queen Tausert, the powerful. Fights against the Sea Peoples under Pharaoh Ramses III, 1182 in the 1151 BC of the 20th dynasty, which ended with Ramses X in 1070 BC. 8. Third Intermediate Period, 1069-525 BC. AD. Priest Kings, Thebes, Erihor Tupsumene. 3rd, 1080 to 945, from the 21st to the 26th dynasties. 21st dynasty, Tanis, 1069 to 945. 22nd and 23rd dynasties, Libyans of Bubastis and Leontopolis, 945-712. 24th dynasty, Sayis, 727-715. 25th dynasty, Nubian, 747 to 656, Pianki, Piai, Chabaka, Chabataka, Taharqa, Tanutamon. Period of rebirth of reunited Kemet. 26th dynasty, 656 to 525. Psammetichus I, Nekau, Psammetichus, Apries, Amasis, Psammetichus III. 9. Late period 5 to 25, 332 BC, from the 27th to the 31st dynasties. Persian dominions, 525 404, 343, 332, Cambyses II, Darius the Phoenician, 2, Xerxes, Artaxerxes the Phoenician, 2, 30th dynasty, 360, 343, Nectanebo, Phaeci, Theos, Nectanebo Uti. 10. Greco-Roman domination from 332 BC. Alexander the Great, Antony, Octavian Ptolemaic period 305 to 30 BC. Ptolemy the Fronde, Dans, lost hieroglyphic inscription, Philae 394 AD. JC 11. Arab Muslim domination 641 AD. AD. The research directions traced, explored, and cleared by Sheikh Anta Diop in Negro Nations and Culture, as well as in his later writings, are numerous. The African origin of humanity, the extent of the Negro substratum of humanity outside of the African continent, the black origin of the Kemetic Nubian civilization, the anteriority of Nubia over Kemet, the origin of the Semitic world, the identification of the major migratory currents, and the formation of African ethnic groups, the linguistic kinship between Kemet and Black Africa, the antiquity of the Iron Age in Africa, the contribution of African thought to Western civilization in the fields of science, arts, and letters, the formation of African states after the decline of Kemet, and the continuity of the historical cultural link until the dawn of modern times, the development of African languages, etc. Concerning the study of Pharaonic Kemet and its belonging to the Negro African universe, he writes, starting from the idea that ancient Kemet is part of the Negro universe, it was necessary to verify it in all possible fields, racial or anthropological, linguistic, sociological, philosophical, historical, etc. If the initial idea is exact, the study of each of these different domains must lead to the corresponding sphere of the African Negro universe. All of these conclusions will form a bundle of concordant facts that eliminate the fortuitous event. This is where the proof of our initial hypothesis. A different method would only have led to a partial verification which would prove nothing. It was necessary to be exhaustive. Sheikh Anta Diop, Anteriority of Negro civilizations, myth or historical truth, Paris, présence africaine. The multidisciplinary approach constitutes one of the characteristics of Cheikh Anta Diop's research method, which, whenever possible, uses exact sciences, dating methods, chemical analysis, etc. to help answer the questions. Multiple questions of history, rather than exhausting oneself in vain polemics. The Egyptology Conference in Cairo, organized by UNESCO in 1974, marked a major milestone in African historiography, that is to say in the work of writing African history. For the first time, African experts have compared, in the field of Egyptology, the results of their research with those of their counterparts from other countries, under the aegis of UNESCO. On the cultural level, the African character of Kemetic civilization was clearly recognized. In particular, Egyptologist Serge Sauneron recognizes that ancient Metramenkimi is not related to Semitic languages. He underlines, agreeing with their research method, all the interest in the linguistic comparison work presented by Théophile Obenga and Cheikh Anta Diop. The scientific legitimacy to systematically search for links, whatever they may be, between ancient Kemet and the rest of Black Africa has been acquired at the international level. The fact that ancient Kemet is treated within the framework of the general history of Africa and the writing by Cheikh Anta Diop in Volume 2 of Chapter 1, entitled The Origin of the Ancient Kemites, constitute two examples of the direct fallout from the Egyptology Conference in Cairo. Proceedings of the Egyptology Conference in Cairo, published by UNESCO, Volume 2 of the General History of Africa. The multidisciplinary technical argument developed to demonstrate the African character of pharaonic Kemet is mainly divided into four registers: cultural, sociological, anthropological, and historical. A. Cultural arguments include material culture and results from comparative studies between ancient Kemet and sub-Saharan Africa, particularly in the areas of A1. Linguistics, where modern Negro-African languages and the Kemetic language, Pharaonic and Coptic, are compared. In terms of grammar, morphology, and syntax, examples of conjugation in ancient Kemetic, Coptic, and Wolof, or Wolof, one of the languages of Senegal. C. Diop, genetic relationship of Pharaonic Kemetic and Nego-African languages, Dakar Abidjan, Ifan, NAA, 1977, pi 34. Examples of phrases. Example 1. C. Diop, genetic relationship of Pharaonic Kemetic and Nego-African languages, Dakar Abidjan, Ifan, near 1977, Peak. Reminder. Wolof or Wolof, language of Senegal. Douala, language of Cameroon. Vocabulary, lexicology. Example of the word name. Phonetic correspondences. Examples: correspondences P. Ancient Kemetic. B. Wolof, Wolof. T. Ancient Kemetic. T. Wolof, Wolof. Other examples of a phonetic correspondences between ancient Kemetic and Wolof, Wolof. A2. Architecture, which focuses on monuments erected in ancient Kemet, Nubia, Ethiopia, Mali, Zimbabwe, etc. A3. The craft that offers the researcher multiple objects of daily life: headrests, combs, woven clothing, sandals, brooms, decorated gourds, etc. Kemet, container 4th millennium BC, Nakada period, Calabash, current sub-Saharan Africa. Headrests, Kemet on the left, Mali on the right. See in particular Aboubakry Moussa Lam. A4. The Shepherders and the Sticks in ANKH in the Khuriru Jezun 3, June 1994. pp. Ben 115, 131. 85 Hairstyles in ANKH Indigo 4-5, 1995, 1996, pp. 1-1, 122, 137. Pharaoh Uput 2, c. 750, 720 BC. Headdress of a pharaoh, 7th to 6th century BC. Ramses The African Origin of Kemetic Hairstyles, 1956. The circles appearing on pharaonic royal headdresses, kepresh, are the stylization of frizzy hair. The use of braids is a typical feature of African culture from antiquity to the present day. Braids in ancient Kemet and contemporary Africa. On the left, the statue of Queen Amis Nefertari. On the right, Kemetic woman in the New Kingdom. A. B. A. Ivory comb of the Horus Djet, Kemet, First Dynasty, circa 3200 BCE, from the royal necropolis of Abydos. Kemetic Museum in Cairo. B. Comb, Kisakulu, wood, H. 17.5 mt. Chokwe, or Lunda people, Democratic Republic of Congo. Source, Roy Sieber, Out of Africa, Sub-Saharan Traditional Arts, Dayton, Ohio, the Dayton Art Institute, USA. Irvin G. Beezer Jr. Collection. Ape 6. Musical instruments, such as harps found in Kemet and Central Africa. Musical instruments in ancient Kemet. On the right, a harp, Central African harp, Gabon. A7. Technology illustrated by metallurgical techniques that allow metals to be collected and melted in order to manufacture various tools and objects. The tools themselves, like the hoe, are also studied. Design, type of use, associated symbolic meaning, terms designating them, comparatively in the Nile Valley and in West Africa. Kemetic hoes, Mfo, West African hoes. A7. Writing. Contemporary Black Africa has preserved hieroglyphic-type writing systems, Vai, Bamun, Nsibidi writings, etc., which are similar to Kemetic hieroglyphic writing. Examples of African writings other than Kemetic writing and Meroitic, Vai, Bamun, Nsibidi writings. Jeff Sea Diop, L'Afrique noire précoloniale, Paris, Présence africaine, 1960. Ati 8. The art where the sculptures of artists from pharaonic Kemet, Benin, Nigeria, the Maasai country, Zimbabwe are apprehended at the same time. The Black African artist from prehistory, examining in particular the cave paintings of the Sahara and Southern Africa, to the present day, uses the colors black, brown, dark red, ochre, and yellow to represent individuals of his community. The few references that follow allow use to compare, in particular, Kemetic painting with that of the rest of the continent. B. Sociological arguments highlight traits common to the societies of ancient Kemet and sub-Saharan Africa. They concern in particular B1. The matriarchy, which characterizes a society organized around women. See Ankh in the 4-5 and Ankh in the 14-15. Nebsen and Nebet Pharaonic Kemet, 18th Dynasty, 1370. BC Brooklyn Museum, Kopol, Congo Gabon, Dapper Museum, Paris. B2. Totemism, which associates in a complex way a given animal, for example the falcon, the crowned crane, the crocodile, the cat, etc., with an individual or a group of individuals, and which gives rise to a cult. Palette and representation of the club head of Pharaoh Narmer, around 3200 BC. Totem emblems in Nigeria. B3. The religion reveals, for example, a replica of the Kemetic Nubian pantheon in Benin, Togo, and Nigeria, among the Fon, Yu, and Yoruba peoples. Ram-headed pectorals, Nigeria and ancient Kemet, Topot, right, Zimbabwe falcon and crocodile. B4. Ethnonymy, that is to say, the study of the names of human groups in present-day Africa, which still retain numerous names attested in ancient Kemet. Atum, Antef, Sek, Mary, Kara, Bara, Bari, Raka, Sensar, Kaba, Keti, Amenti, Kamara, Konare, Sankale, Sangare, Sankare, etc. In 1984, UNESCO published as part of the writing of the General History of Africa in the Associated Collection, Studies and Documents, Ndiron 6, 1984, an entire work devoted to this question. African ethnonyms and toponyms. Note also the study Some Remarks on the Names of People in Pharaonic Kemet. In Analyse de la Faculté des Lettres et Sciences Humaines, Neu 13, University of Dakar, 1983, pp. 141-153. By AML, as well as the state doctoral thesis by the same author. The Origin of the Fulbe and the Halpularen, Kemetological Approach, Cheikh Anta Diop University of Dakar, 1989, 2 volumes. Published in co-edition Présence Africaine, Kepera, under the title On the Kemetic Origin of the Fulani, 1993. Lam delves deeper into the study of the relationships between ancient Kemet and the rest of Black Africa in his book entitled Les Chemins du Nil, published in 1997, co-edited Présence Africaine Kepera. See also the collection of articles, The Sahara or the Nile Valley, Overview of the Problem of the Cradle of the Cultural Unity of Black Africa by Aboubakry Moussalam, Dakar, Ifan, Publifan, Kepera, 1994. Example, Pharaoh Mentuhotep, 3rd, 2010, 1998, BC, our era. His crowning name is the Shankare, bringing the soul of Ra to life, as indicated in the first cartouche below. B5, royalty and its attributes such as the Uraeus, appearing respectively on the royal headdresses of Pharaoh and the Oni of Ife. Pharaoh Amenhotep III, the Oni of Ife. C. Anthropological arguments also fall into various fields. Seaborn 1. The study of Kemetic hieroglyphic texts provides the terms by which the inhabitants of ancient Kemet referred to themselves as Negroes. C2. The study of the texts of Greek and Latin historians and philosophers reveals numerous testimonies on the phenotype of the ancient Kemites. For example, Herodotus, 480-425 BC, nicknamed the father of history, great traveler and eyewitness, writes, "Obviously, in fact, the Colchidians are of Kemetic race, but Kemites told me that in their opinion, the Colchidians were descended from the soldiers of Sesostris. I had conjectured this myself based on 2 clues. Firstly, because they have black skin and frizzy hair. In fact, this proves nothing, because other peoples are still in this case. Then, and with more authority, for the reason that, alone among men, the Colchidians, Kemites and Ethiopians have practiced circumcision since the beginning." Extract from the Greek text of Herodotus, Book de Sekou, Euterpe, paragraph 104. The Neophysical type of the ancient Kemites was an obvious fact in antiquity. Herodotus, Book 2, Aristote, Physiognomy. 6. Lucian, Navigation, paragraph 2 and 3. Apollodor, Book 2, The Family of Inachus, paragraph 3 and 4. Ishaile, The Suppliants, around 719 to 720, around 745. Estrabon, Geography, Book A, chapter 3, paragraph 10. De Iodore de Sicile, Universal History, Book 30. The study of the Bible, Jewish and Muslim traditions which preserve the memory of the descendants of Cham, biblical ancestor of the blacks, in particular Cush, Couch, and Mizraim, Kemet. C4. Iconography, sculptures and paintings. Pharaoh Cheops around 2550, Pharaoh Pepi Dainch around P2 2290, Pharaoh Mentuhotep Barkaintes around 2100, Queen Amis Nefertari Pharaoh Amenhotep III, the god Osiris, Book of the Dead, Papyrus Nebked, around 1400-1350 BC, Louvre Museum, the god Amon, Der el-Bahari, 18th Dynasty, Luxor Museum. Western art also provides multiple iconographic testimonies. Hercules fighting Busiris and Kemetic priests, cult of Isis. Herculaneum, wall painting, 1st century AD. Painted vase, painter of Pan. Roman ceramic depicting Pharaoh Sarah is brought to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh returns. Sarah to Abraham Oktatuch, 11th century. C.5. Physical anthropology and molecular biology. With the study of osteological measurements of skeletons, the study of blood groups and the pigmentation of the skin of mummies, melanin, the chemical body responsible for the color of the skin, is preserved over time, and it should not be confused with mummification products such as bitumen, etc. Reveal the kinship of the ancient Kemites with the Negro African populations. Kef, Cheikh, Anti-Diop, pigmentation of the ancient Kemites, melanin test, in IFAM Bulletin, Volume XXHV, Series B, Nindiga 3, Dakar, 1973. He indicates the existence of several possible methods of measuring melanin. He uses one of them, thin section technique observed in ultraviolet or natural light, to study the pigmentation of the skin of some Kemetic mummies preserved in the anthropology laboratory of the Musée de l'Homme in Paris. In February 1974, he presented the results of his analysis at the Cairo Conference on the settlement of ancient Kemet and the decipherment of Meroitic writing. Cf. General History of Africa, Studies and Documents. 1. UNESCO, Paris in 1978. And General History of Africa. Volume 2, Paris, Jeune Afrique, Stock, UNESCO, 1980. For around 20 years, molecular biology techniques, more precisely those implemented for the study of ancient or archaeogenetic genes, analysis of deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA, etc., have been developed and are applied to the study of Kemetic mummies. Works by Svante P. Abo, Munich. DNA. Crick and Watson characterized the structure of DNA in 1953, DNA and chromosomes, etc. D. The historical arguments which establish the anteriority of Upper Kemet in relation to Lower Kemet, the origin of Kemetic civilization, which is to be sought in Africa towards the south and not towards the north, in the countries of the Asian Middle East. This argument is based on D1, the study of Kemetic hieroglyphic texts, which shows, for example, that the Kemetic faced the south, i.e., the direction of the land of origin of his ancestors, who had over time traveled up the course of the divinized Nile. And in fact, for the Kemetic, the sun rose on his left and set on his right. D2. The historical tradition reported, for example, by Diodorus of Sicily around 90 to 20 BC. The Ethiopians say that the Kemites are one of their colonies, which was led into Kemet by Osiris. They even claimed that this country was at the beginning of the world only a sea, but that the Nile, carrying in its floods a lot of silt from Ethiopia, had finally filled it and made it part of the continent. D3. Geophysics and the dating of geological samples using physico-chemical methods such as that of carbon-14 can make it possible to establish when the emergence of the Nile Delta occurred and to confirm or invalidate the information collected on this subject by Herodotus and Diodorus of Sicily from the Kemites and Ethiopians. Herodotus already criticized the opinion of the Ionians, who reduced Kemet to the delta. If we adopted this terminology, we could show that formerly the Kemites had no country. We know in fact that their delta, they say it themselves, and this is my feeling, is a land of alluvium, a land, we can say, newly appeared. Formerly, moreover, Kemet was called the Thebaid, whose circumference is 6,120 stadia. Herodotus, Book 2, 15. Cheikh Anta-Diop, who, on the basis of the testimonies of Homer, Senecus, Ammian, Marcelin, Vetifaud, 16th, and Herodotus, thinks that Upper Kemet was before the Delta, appealed in 1967 to the verdict of the exact sciences in these terms. Let us only add that today, modern physical dating methods applied to archaeology would make it possible to resolve the question. Radiocarbon tests carried out on cores taken from the respective locations of these different cities would make it possible to determine with sufficient certainty the dates of emergence of the lands which support these cities, and generally the age of the delta as a habitable dry land. This is a precise case where modern physics would help archaeology to escape the vicious circle of the exegesis of texts. Check ante diop, anteriority of Negro civilizations, myth or historical truth, op cit p. 12. This wish was in some way granted with the study of sea levels based on the dating of geological samples. In Chapter 5, Legends, Stories, Sea Levels, of the book L'Homme et le Climat, Paris, Édition de Noël, 1985, by Jacques L. Abery, former director of the Center for Low Radioactivities of the CEA-CNRS at Gif-sur-Yvette, indicates that the results of these dating establish that the movement of the Kemetic civilization from the south towards the Nile Delta is correlated with the lowering of sea level and perfectly matches the tradition reported by the ancients. The figure 1 is taken from the article by Jacques L. Abery, Dating, Methods Developed at the CEA, in Revue Générale Nucléaire, RGN, Nondegizruru 6, November-December 1989, page 446. Deep 4. Archaeology with excavations carried out in Upper Kemet and Sudan, which highlight the southern origin of Kemetic civilization. The American archaeologist Bruce Williams, who studied the objects from these excavations, wrote in the UNESCO Courier, February-March 1980, pp. 43-44. Thanks to the testimony provided by Cemetery L, the period just preceding the First Dynasty becomes, for the first time, a historical era. An astonishing fact emerges, absolutely contrary to all previous ideas on the question. For 9 generations in at least, from 3500, 3400 to 3200, 3100 BC, Group A Nubia was a unified state, possessing all the attributes of a civilization: a government, a pharaoh, civil servants, an official religion, scripture and monuments. A state strong enough to unite peoples who were not of the same origin. This is how the inhabitants of Ta Seti, the land of the Ark, the name by which the ancient Kemites designated Nubia, participated fully and on a level of equality that no one had ever suspected, to the irresistible growth of civilization on the banks of the Nile. Bruce Williams' report of these excavations carried out in the 60s was published in 1986. Excavations between Abu Simbel and the Sudan frontier. Part 1. The A Group Royal Cemetery at Kustul, Cemetery L, University of Chicago, Oriental Institute Nubian Expedition, Volume 3, Chicago, 1986. See also An Kach, Nig 67, 1997-1998, pp. Censer unearthed in the Kustul Cemetery, testifying to the existence in Nubia from the end of the 4th millennium of a unified state, possessing all the attributes of a civilization, a government, a pharaoh, civil servants, an official religion, scripture and monuments. See the work of Bruce Williams. Babakar Salih's work, Ethiopian Roots of Ancient Kemet, is a study devoted to this line of research, etc. At the end of the Egyptology conference in Cairo, Cheikh Anta Diop Kales, for a reorientation of chematological studies which must be accompanied by a dialogue with African researchers. This conference can be considered as a turning point, which allowed Egyptology to be reconciled with Africa and to regain its fertility. Scientific dialogue on the international level has been established, and we can hope that it will not be broken. Following the debates, participants did not fail to express their desire to redirect their work towards Africa and to intensify their collaboration with African researchers. And African studies will only escape the vicious circle in which they move, to rediscover all their meaning and all their fruitfulness by orienting themselves towards the Nile Valley. Conversely, Egyptology will only emerge from its centuries-old sclerosis, from the hermeticism of texts, the day it has the courage to explode the valve which isolates it, doctrinal why, from the life-giving source that constitutes For it, the Negro world, Kmt Black, anteriority of Negro civilizations, myth or historical truth, Op. Cit. p. 12. Now let's review the work of some modern scholars that have affirmed the Africanity of ancient Kemet. The idea of the immigration of foreigners as an impetus for pre-dynastic culture can no longer be sustained, as newly available information and subsequent ideas have changed the picture radical why. For the Nile Valley, a relatively large amount of data is available for the late Paleolithic cultures and also for pre-dynastic times. The downcutting of the Nile, i.e., its erosion downwards between CU 11,000 and 8,000 BP, resulted in a reduced floodplain and restricted environmental possibilities. See Chapter 4 for discussion of many aspects of this. The Nile Valley will nevertheless not have been deserted, although the sites are now covered by more recent alluvial deposits. Human occupation of the Nile Valley is attested for the Epi-Paleolithic from c. 10,000 BC onwards. But again, the sites in the Nile Valley itself are largely covered by flood plain deposits and have only been discovered in exceptional circumstances. Discussions concerning contacts between Kemet and the Near East, and especially why the Near Eastern influence on the origin of Kemetic culture date back to the end of the 19th century. The idea of a dynastic race coming from the Near East, like Petrie's new race mentioned above, was still being defended by Brian Emery as recently as the 1960s, 99, but has otherwise been completely abandoned. Stylistic influence from Mesopotamia has been discussed extensively, 100, and although a few elements such as the headdress of the Master of the Beasts on the Gebel El Arak knife handle, 101 show convincing Mesopotamian influence, this does not imply direct contact between Kemet and Mesopotamia. It is fairly implausible that such contact ever existed, not least because not a single Mesopotamian sherd has yet been found at any pre-dynastic site. The importance of contact with Mesopotamia has certainly been overestimated, resulting even in the reconstruction of a trade route leading directly from Mesopotamia through the Persian Gulf to the Red Sea, without a trace of hard evidence. Contact with the southern Levant, on the contrary, is well attested for pre-dynastic times. 103. However, the earliest attestations, dating to the Badarian, are so few that no direct contact could have been involved. Such direct links can only be ascertained from the later Naqada II period onwards, when the number of finds increases strongly. Naqada III, you had an exchange of goods, indications of colonization. West Asia is represented in Kemetic culture and ideology as chaos, while natives are the forces of order. Stuart Tyson Smith, 2001, described evidence which showed that the ancient Kemetic culture shared strong affinities with modern African cultural practices, such as divine kingship, the use of headrests along with circumcision, and that the archaeological evidence also strongly supports an African origin for the ancient Kemites. In 2018, Smith reviewed evidence which indicated linkages between the Upper Kemetic region, the Sahara, and the Sudanese Nubia. In particular, he argued that the cultural features which characterized the Kemetic civilization were widely distributed in northeastern Africa, but not in Western Asia, and this had earlier origins in the Saharan wet phase period. Redford, Donald, 2001. Smith, Tyson, Stewart, The Oxford Encyclopedia of Ancient Kemet, Oxford University Press, pp. 27-28. Bioarchaeologist Nancy Lovell had stated that there is a sufficient body of morphological evidence to indicate that ancient southern Kemites had physical characteristics within the range of variation of both ancient and modern indigenous peoples in the Sahara and tropical Africa. She summarized that, in general, the inhabitants of Upper Kemet and Nubia had the greatest biological affinity to people of the Sahara and more southerly areas. but exhibited local variation in an African context. Frank Yurko in 1989 expressed the view that among foreign populations, Nubians were closest ethnical Y to the Kemites, shared the same culture in the pre-dynastic period, and used the same pharaonic political structure. Yurko noted that some Middle Kingdom rulers, particularly some pharaohs of the 12th dynasty, had strong Nubian features due to the origin of the dynasty in the Aswan region of southern Kemet. He also identifies the pharaoh Seqenen-Retau of the 17th dynasty as having Nubian features. In 1996, he said that the peoples of Kemet, the Sudan, and much of Northeast Africa are generally regarded as a Nilotic continuity, with widely ranging physical features, complexions light to dark, various hair and craniofacial types. Black Athena Revisited by Lefkowitz. Christopher Ehret, 1996, argued that the evidence of language and culture had shown ancient Kemet was rooted in an African context, and the origins of Kemetic ethnicity lay in the area south of Kemet. Christopher Ehret, 1996. Ancient Kemetic as an African language, Kemet as an African culture. In Kmt in Afrika, Theodore Kalenko, ed. Indianapolis, Indianapolis Museum of Art, PPTT 2527. Joseph Vogel, 1997, stated, "The period when sub-Saharan Africa was most influential in Kemet was a time when neither Kemet, as we understand it, cultural Y, nor the Sahara, as we understand it, geographical Y, existed. Populations and cultures now found south of the desert roamed far to the north. The culture of Upper Kemet, which became dynastic Kemetic civilization, could fairly be called a Sudanese transplant." Encyclopedia of Pre-Colonial Africa, Archaeology, History, Languages, Cultures and Environments. Walnut Creek, Caliph, Altamira Press, 1997, pp 465-472. Toby A. H. Wilkinson, 2000, writes that in the elite art of the late pre-dynastic period, the use of Mesopotamian iconography is well known. He mentions in particular the intertwined serpopards and the rosettes on the Narmer palette and the Narmer mace head. After the reign of Narmer, indigenous Kemetic motifs were preferred. Toby Wilkinson in 2002 proposed an origin for the Kemites somewhere in the eastern desert, and presented evidence that much of pre-dynastic Kemet was representative of the traditional African cattle culture, typical of southern Sudanese and East African pastoralists of today. Toby Wilkinson has cited the iconography on rock art in the eastern desert region as depicting what he interpreted to be among the earliest representations of the royal crowns, and suggested the red crown could have originated in the southern Nile Valley. Wilkinson, Toby, 2003. Genesis of the Pharaohs. Dramatic new discoveries rewrite the origins of ancient Kemet. London, Thames and Hudson, pp 5482. Donald B. Redford wrote in 2004 that it is reasonable to assume that the 17th dynasty originated in Nubia based on the expanded presence of Nubians in Kemet during that time period. The 17th dynasty conducted a succession of military campaigns against Avaris in Lower Kemet and also Kerma in Nubia, resulting eventual Y in the collapse of Kerma and its occupation. In the 8th century BCE, Kush considered itself the sole custodian and proponent of the unadulterated Kemetic tradition. Bruce, Redford, Donald, 2006. From Slave to Pharaoh, The Black Experience of Ancient Kemet. Johns Hopkins University Press. PPPU 35-37. Gourdin et al. Criticized the methodology of the Schünemann et al. Study and argued that the sub-Saharan genetic affinities may be attributed to early settlers and the relevant sub-Saharan genetic markers do not correspond with the geography of known trade routes. In 2022, Daniel E. Candelora noted several limitations with the 2017 Scheunemann et al. Study, such as its untested sampling methods, small sample size, and problematic comparative data, which she argued had been misused to legitimize racist conceptions of ancient Kemet with scientific evidence. Was Diop actually refuted? The Peopling of Ancient Kemet and the Deciphering of Meroitic Script, proceedings of the symposium held in Cairo from Sonia Zakrzewski, who wrote in 2003, studied skeletal samples from the Badarian period to the Middle Kingdom in Upper Kemet. The raw data suggested that the ancient Kemites in general had tropical body plans, but that their proportions were actual supernegroid, i.e. the limb indices are relatively longer than in many African populations. She proposed that the apparent development of an increasingly African body plan over time may also be due to Nubian mercenaries being included in the Middle Kingdom sample. Zakrzewski concluded that the results must remain provisional due to the relatively small sample sizes and the lack of skeletal material that crosscuts all social and economic groups within each time period. Robert Morco wrote in 2005 that the ancient Kemites were not white in any European sense, nor were they Caucasian. We can say that the earliest population of ancient Kemet included African people from the Upper Nile, African people from the regions of the Sahara and modern Libya, and smaller numbers of people who had come from southwestern Asia and perhaps the Arabian Peninsula. Morco-Trobe, 2005. The Kemites, An Introduction, New York, Routledge, pp. 10-13. Soy Keita wrote in 2022 on the origins and the identity of the ancient Kemites. He examined various forms of evidence, which included archaeology, historical linguistics, and biological data to determine the population affinities. He concluded that various disciplines indicate the groundings of Kemet within northeastern Africa, and the ancient Kemites were a people and society that emerged in the Saharo-Nilotic region of northeast Africa. Keita also reviewed studies on the biological affinities of the ancient Kemetic population and wrote in 1993 that the original inhabitants of the Nile Valley were primarily a variety of indigenous Northeast Africans from the areas of the desiccating Sahara and more southerly areas. He also added that whilst Kemetic society became more social, complex and biological, varied, the ethnicity of the Niloto-Saharo-Sudanese origins did not change. Keita, SOY, 1993. Studies and comments on ancient Kemetic biological relationships. History in Africa, 20, 129-154. Linguistic evidence shows that the Remenkimi called themselves black. So, the etymology of Kmt Kemet. One of the native names for ancient Kemet was Kmt. This is the one that survived into Coptic as Keme and Zemi. The etymology of this word is generally understood as meaning the black one. Kmt, the black one. This is the translation provided by the Wörterbuch of Ehrman and Grappo, WWB to V126. Several facts have led researchers to translate this word as the black one. The first of these is the existence of a Kemetic word kilmen, meaning to be black, and a feminine suffix t, both of which can be combined to form an adjective meaning black, or, secondarily, a noun, derived from this adjective via conversion. that is, without adding an additional affix. The case of French. In French, for example, is an adjective to which a feminine suffix, he, is added to give the feminine adjective, through a process of conversion, becomes a noun, which may refer to a white woman. The problem is that unlike the adjective in French, km has a lot of homonyms in Kemetic. This is due in part to the fact that the earliest stages of Pharaonic Kemetic did not transcribe vowels. If the situation was the same in French as it was in Kemetic, the adjective white would be written like blue, balo, wheat, etc. In Kemetic, the word kmt, Kemet, could a priori have originally meant the black one, but could also have meant the complete, from the root kem, to be complete, or even have had a lost etymology. The etymology of the word Germany dates back to the ancient people called the Germani, whose etymology, for example, is not known. The meaning of Kmt, according to Cheikh Anta Diop, 1980, 6162, following a discovery made by Sosun Sugan, this term etymological yai means the Negroes. The Senegalese scholar expressed himself in this regard in the following terms. It is the strongest term in the Pharaonic language to indicate blackness. It is therefore written with a hieroglyph which represents a piece of wood that has charred and not crocodile scales. This word is the etymological source for the famous root Kmt, which has proliferated in modern anthropological literature. The biblical root ham would derive from it. It was therefore necessary to distort the facts so that it could mean today, white, in the language of scholars, while in the Pharaonic tongue which gave birth to it, it meant charcoal black. In the Kemetic language, one forms a collective from an adjective or a noun by putting them in the feminine singular. Kmt has been formed like this from the adjective Iconographic Kmt Black. It therefore means rigorously the Negroes, or at least the blacks. The term is a collective which thus designates all, the people of Pharaonic Kemet, as black people. In other words, from a purely grammatical point of view, if we want to designate Negroes in the Pharaonic language, we cannot use any other word than the very one the Kemites used to designate themselves. Whether or not the hieroglyph with the phonetic value kulunter represents a piece of wood that has charred or crocodile scales, the root kilometers represented by this hieroglyph does indeed denotes blackness. This term is attested in Erman and Grappo's Wörterbuch. However, it only appears in one and same text, a hymn to King Sesostris III. This is km.t. The fact that it appears twice with the same spelling in the same text suggests that this is probably not a scribal error. This term is distinguished from the more frequent self-names of Kemites and their country, namely KMTJW, RMTN, km.t, and km.t. KMTJW means those of the black, and RMTN km.t, people of the black one. The difference between Kmt, Kemet, and Kmt, Kemites, rests on the nature of the determinative of the second, which represents a man and a woman, as well as the three traits marking the collective. Generally, when km.t Kemet is used, it is with the determinative of the city, sign 049, without determinative or with that of the cultivated land, sign N23, not with that of the man and the woman. Golet, 1929, 36-37, analyzed the occurrences of this exceptional form of km.t. JBNF and MH, H3NF KMT, RDJ-NF, DHRT, MBF, J-NF, NPN, MKJ, NFF, T3WI, SGIH, NF, JDBY, JPOD-NF, NNS, NF, Kmt, JSAR, NF, Shen WW Dwets. It was after he had ruled the people of Kemet, Lit, the Black Land, and after he had put the Red Land in his company that he came to us. Diop explains that there is a priori a possibility that the word km.t, Kemet, is a reference to the black soil, as it is often stated in ancient Kemetic literature. However, he denies this possibility, explaining that the collective km.t, black people, shows that the color applies to the determinative, and that therefore, in the context of km.t, Kemet, the reference to the blackness of the soil must be secondary compared to that of its inhabitants, like in the expressions Black Africa or Nigritia. According to Diop, the same is true of the term kmt, often used to refer to the Kemites, which would be comparable to the expressions the inhabitants of Black Africa and the Nigritians, which both designate black populations. Diop unfortunately does not take into account another hypothesis, according to which km.t is both a reference to the color of the Nile silt and the inhabitants of Pharaonic Kemet. Khnum developed people from the soil. This term for black Shamsio, Gekyo, was also used to describe the color of the soil of Kemet, due to silt, in the form kmt. Like Adam, which was created and modeled from the red earth, Adamat, the Kemites, kmt, RMT and kmt, or km.t, were created and modeled, according to a tradition recorded as early as the 5th dynasty by Khnum, the ram-headed potter, from the silt of Kmt. Several examples show that this was not always the case. In ancient Kemet, the crown of Upper Kemet was called HDT traditional Y called, while the red crown was called Deshart. These two terms referred to the white and red colors of the two crowns. In contexts comparing them, the red is presented as Intai Kmt Jamjet Benkut Snai, literally the undarker, the Kmt of the two crowns. Kmt used to refer to the full range of human complexion. Two brothers named Hapi DSR and Hapi Kem. We see this pattern throughout African languages. Lam, 1993. Dark versus light-skinned. One cannot reject this hypothesis a priori. However, an alternative hypothesis has been suggested by Lam, 1993, 259-264, according to which the epithets Dishar and Kilom were references to the skin color of the people so named. When a person is described as Keonols, this person was considered as dark-skinned. When described as Dishar, he was fair-skinned. Lam recalled that this type of distinction was common in Black African languages, wondering even if it was not exclusive to them. The example of the Fon language. Let's illustrate Lam's hypothesis with the Fon language, mainly spoken in the Republic of Benin. To refer to a dark-skinned black human being, a dark-skinned black man or woman, one will say respectively Mewi, literally human being be black, Nyawi, man be black, and Nawi, lady be black. Ganyu Soglo, Anyawi, black man. On the other hand, to designate a black human being, a black man or a black woman with light skin, one will say respectively Mevo, literally human being red, Nyavo, man red being, and Navo, lady, be red. As we have seen, the skin of the Kemites could be qualified as quilting to refer to a darker complexion than another, in this case that of the harvesters, with the skin darkened by the sun compared to other people whose skin was not. The term Keom also appears, for example, as a verbal predicate in the name of Kemsit, Kuinkimist. The woman is black, a wife of King Mentuhotep II. Ancient Kemetic civilization is deeply rooted in African cultural, linguistic, and anthropological traditions, as evidenced by its shared practices with modern African societies, such as divine kingship and circumcision. The term km.t, used by the Kemites to describe themselves and their land, underscores their identity as black people connected to the African continent. Biological and archaeological studies affirm the African origins of the Kemites, aligning them with populations from the Nile Valley, the Sahara, and sub-Saharan Africa. Historical accounts from Greek and Roman historians, along with geological and archaeological findings, further support the southern African origins of Kemetic civilization. These findings refute earlier theories of Near Eastern influence, affirming Kemet as a central cultural hub within a unified African heritage.